So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Wheel of Fortune card. And, there's a lot to this card. And so I've been studying it for a while, but I think we can get through quite a bit of information here. So let's go ahead and get started. And I think that the overarching message of this card is change. And if we look at the Osho Zen Tarot, we kind of see that it says change down here on the bottom. And that change is something that we see in cycles. Changes repeat themselves. So we see these patterns. And we see them in nature, we see them in our lives. We just notice these things and they create an experience. Now, if we look at the RWS card, we know that it has a background that's kind of a biblical association. So you'll see that in different cards in the RWS system and even a little bit in the Toph system. But I think it's important to explore that a little bit because there are some things that really tie into the meaning of this card when we look at that. So let's start there. So it's based on a vision by Ezekiel of the wheel. And Ezekiel sees this lightning, and lightning is present on the Toph system here. And that lightning is associated with Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, because that is associated with Zeus. And Zeus and Jupiter are pretty much the same. And so that's his symbol because Jupiter is known to be holding a bolt of lightning. So that's that connection. And we can see the symbol for Jupiter both on the RWS deck here, down here in the corner. And we also see the symbol of Jupiter on the Toph deck over here on the bottom. So we know that there is a deity associated with this. There is a sign that's overall associated with this. And that comes out in Ezekiel's vision. And we'll see that lightning in other cards as well. For example, on the Celestial Tarot, you can see there's a lightning bolt down here at the bottom. It says Jupiter here at the top, and we kind of see a Zeus-like figure there. Now, the next thing that he sees in his vision are these cherubim. There's 4 of them, and they have 4 faces. And the faces are a human face in the front, which is connected to Aquarius. And then we have a lion on the right side, which is Leo. In the back, there is eagle for Scorpio. Now, Scorpio has different signs. It has an eagle, scorpion, and a snake, but the one in the back is the eagle for Scorpio. And then we have the ox and the bull on the left side for Taurus. Now, these are fixed signs of the zodiac, and fixed signs are more stable. And so the cherubim are known to be these regulators or controllers of whatever they're trying to prevent access to. They're kind of gatekeepers. We see them at the gate of the Garden of Eden in the Bible. We also see them guarding the tree of life after man falls and Yahweh decides to block them off from that. And then also for access to the Ark of the Covenant. So anytime there's a need to prevent access, a lot of times you'll see cherubim there. And I think that that's fitting because of their nature of being these fixed signs of the zodiac and how they are about these cycles. So those fixed signs are related to the cycles of the year and how those things happen over and over again in a repeating pattern. And we also call that the wheel of the year. So the wheel of the year, I think, is important to kind of talk about a little bit. It's on this card right here from the 78 Tarot Elemental, or actually this is the 78 Tarot Ecological. And we see that there's flowers, there are leaves, and there's branches that are around the wheel. And this is about looking at those cycles and honoring them and trying to get your hand involved in it in order to bring about things in your life or to bring about things in nature or in the world that you feel will be positive, you feel like they will be a benefit to human beings. And so you can intervene in that. And I think that's important because another big aspect of this card is down here in the other corner, and that is the glyph for the Hebrew word, which is kaf, K-A-P-H. And that means hand in cupping shape or palm in cupping shape. And that is because the palm of your hand controls the wheel, and you cup it around the wheel in order to move that around. And if we look back at the Celestial Tarot, we have this Zeus-like being who is got his hand, he's a huge hand here, on the wheel. And the point is to get your hand on there, and you can do that through different things. Like I said, honoring the seasons and looking at patterns in nature and being a part of that and incorporating that into your practice, into your life. But we'll talk more about that. Now, I think that the next thing that he saw was really important because he sees these souls inside of these wheels that these cherubim are guarding. So not only are there wheels beside them, but they have these souls in them. And he says that these are souls of the creatures, but he doesn't specifically say what creatures. It doesn't make any sense. I haven't really figured out what he meant by that, but there are souls in there. And I think that, you know, anytime you have something inside of something else, it seems like there's a barrier around it. So what is going on here? I like on the Fountain Tarot how it kind of has this soul inside of his wheel. And it sort of seems like, I don't know, it could be representing, you know, the Merkaba, but it could also be representing just that sort of being encapsulated inside of the wheel. So I think that that's really an interesting concept and something that we should think about. There are a few other things about this vision that I want to go ahead and mention. So the other thing that I want to mention is that one of the other things he sees is this person on a throne. And it's this sort of powerful being that's surrounded by fire and light and lightning. And he's in awe of this. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? And he never really says exactly who this is. And so the story sort of doesn't really complete itself. Now, it could be Yahweh of the Old Testament, but it kind of seems like a Zeus-like figure, to me at least. I'm not saying that it is. I'm not saying it's Jupiter, but it just kind of reminds me of that. And that whole idea or concept of free will and fate and destiny and what controls that. So the wheel it's called the Wheel of Fortune because it comes from the deity Fortuna, who is said to be even on the same level of Zeus or maybe slightly above Zeus. And she also has her hand on the wheel. And so that's where the word fortune comes from, Fortuna. And over time that morphed into Lady Luck, because if someone else is controlling this, then you're at their mercy, right? So it's kind of like luck. And in fact, one of the big things outlining most of the information that I found, or overlaying most of the information that I found on the Wheel of Fortune, it had this undertone of things beyond our control, things just happening, ups and downs of life. And I think that that's true, but I think that more and more people are starting to realize that we can have a say in this. We are not puppets that can be controlled by this roulette wheel of fortune and Zeus spinning this thing on their own. And as that glyph says, our hand belongs on the wheel. This is interesting, what I want to show you here. If you take the Magician card, which is all about manifestation and control, and we put it behind the wheel, it looks like let's take a look at it. It looks like he's controlling it. And so if we have the Magician as a part of our lives, and we actually connect to our inner self, which is our true magician, then I think that that is the point where things change. And cycles are something that generate change. They generate change, but in repeating patterns. You'll see along the spectrum of a cycle, different aspects of things, but ultimately coming back to that same thing and just repeating over and over again. It's like the Ouroboros chasing its tail over and over again. And I find that interesting because we see that all over the place. We see it with the planets. So on the Wheel of Change Tarot, we see that the planets, as they go around something, that circular motion, it gives us the way to track time. It gives us the ability to see time and organize it in a way that fits our linear perspective. And then we have the moon going around the earth, which also categorizes time. And I love on the Somnia Tarot how there's a clock here, but this clock's on fire. And that's what I want to get to. Patterns. So are we dictated by being in a pattern? I think to some extent, yes, but ultimately, this is my view of it. We're supposed to break patterns. We're supposed to break patterns. We're not supposed to be bound to time. Time is for here. We move outside of time when we leave here. Life, death, rebirth is a cycle. You can repeat that cycle. That's your choice. However, I think that the ultimate point is to break it and go outside of time. Now, if we go back to Ezekiel's vision and we talk a little bit more about what they're guarding and what these souls are in these wheels, I feel like it has to do with a karmic cycle or a karmic reincarnation type of cycle. And I'll tell you why and what I think about that. If we look more at the RWS card, we can see that there's Anubis there. Anubis is another guard, and he's on the moon card in the Toph deck. Let's take a look at that one. There's a pathway, and he stands along the side of the pathway. There's two of them, which is interesting because I was listening to someone's NDE about, their experience, and they said that they came into contact with Anubis, and it was an interesting story because they said that there was more than one. It was not just that Anubis was the name of this being, it was the name of a group of beings. And so the fact that the Toph system has these two things on there is interesting to me. But you have to get past them. And they hold these scales, and these scales will weigh your heart. So you put your heart on one side and the feather of Ma'at on the other side. And in order to pass them, your heart has to weigh less than the feather. Otherwise, Anubis will guide you along a sort of karmic or reincarnation type of path. So you'll either go back into the underworld, or you can go beyond Anubis to wherever he dictates you can go. So he's a sort of gatekeeper, but a gatekeeper that goes beyond the cherubim and more into a decision maker. And I don't know if the decision should lie in his hands. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I know it sounds a little bit strange, but I don't think that the decision should lie in the hands of these gatekeepers and controllers. The other controller on here, the other gatekeeper on here is the Sphinx. And the Sphinx is a different type of gatekeeper because it tests the mind. So the Sphinx is holding a sword, which represents air and mental energy. So he's testing the mind and asking riddles. There's all these riddles that the Sphinx will say to see if you understand enough to get around them or to get past them. The main riddle, the main thing about the Sphinx is you can ignore him. There is no power that the Sphinx holds, but he makes you feel that way because he's a confidence man, a con man. And so you think that you can't pass without solving this riddle, but you don't even have to answer it. You can do what you want. That's the biggest riddle of it. And so they're guarding this portal. And to me, it's sort of a portal of destination, of fate. Who's deciding that? You? Is your hand deciding it or someone else's? That's the choice. And that's breaking the cycle. Whether you do that or not, again, it's up to you and how you identify with the character here. We talked about that in like the last 3 cards. You can check those out. Your character belongs to the wheel. If you constantly focus on the character, you will be a part of the wheel. You must look past the character in order to break time and space, go through the portal and get past the wheel. Now, I think that involves the inner workings of yourself. And so this card right here by the Tarot Mystical Moments is beautiful explaining that. I think that this person's holding this timepiece, but their inner workings are churning. You see the gears inside of them. It's understanding the inside and what's truly there and who you truly are by connecting to the heart center. And then from that point, things change. From that point, your true will manifests, and that takes control. So there's something else here that's important, because when we put those cards together, I want to look at that one more time, because when we put those cards together, we have this other thing down here in the bottom corner. And where there's actually two things in that bottom corner. There's, on the top deck, there's one thing that's stuck to the wheel, and that's this deity, or they call him a monster, but it's a deity called Typhon, and it's created by Gaia. And Gaia created this deity because Gaia wanted to challenge Zeus, because Zeus defeated her children and imprisoned their souls. And so it kind of seems like Zeus is a part of this wheel. He has these souls inside of this wheel, and Gaia sends Typhon to try to break the cycle. Ultimately, though, Typhon was defeated, and we can see in the top deck that on the wheel card there, he is wound up in the wheel. And you see, if we put these cards together, there's another being there trying to pull him off. So you see that this other being's trying to pull him out of the wheel, because he got kind of wrapped up in this thing and demonized, or just, kind of stuck there. And so he's trying to pull him out of this. But what is that thing? It's interesting because there are two similar things there. There's one on the sort of on the side of it, and that's called the Hermanubis. So it's a combination of Anubis and Hermes. And Hermanubis is a part of the wheel. It's another gatekeeper. But the other thing there is not. The other thing there, I talked about it when I talked about the magician card, that is Toph. Toph is often seen as this sort of baboon-like statue creature, and so he's represented there as well. So Toph is trying to pull Typhon out of the wheel, just as he's trying to pull us out of the karmic wheel. I think that he presents it in the form of information because he's a messenger god, but he also gets conflated with Mercury, Hermes, and Anubis when he's separate and different. And, people may not agree with me on that, but from what I've seen, he does not fit the bill. If we look at Hermes or Mercury as he's controlling the wheel there, and you look behind his head, you see something there. And it's like these two snakes. Now, those two snakes are a symbol of a thing called Abraxas, or the demiurge, and that goes into Gnostic teachings. And I don't want to get into that, but that symbol represents something that connects to the Old Testament. And I think that he's pulling that wheel in the counterclockwise direction. And in the counterclockwise direction, the wheel says Torah. And that's the biblical text of the Old Testament deity, Yahweh. He's pulling it that way. If you pull in the other direction, clockwise, in the direction that Toph is pulling, it says Tarot. Now, the Torah is missing the H if you go all the way around. It doesn't go all the way around. The only one that goes all the way around is Tarot. So the only way to stay on top of the wheel there is to really understand the reflective side of what you are, which is what Tarot points you to. And I know I said a lot there, but stepping off the wheel is important. And in this card from the Navigators of the Mystic Sea Tarot, we can see that the person's stepping off of the wheel. But what does it take to do that? That's the question. Maybe adding a little bit of chaos, a little bit of, that's why people talk about chaos magic and some other things there. But by adding a little bit of lawlessness, Gaia tried to put that into the wheel. And when you think about Gaia, Gaia is our mother. Gaia is Mother Earth. Mother Earth had to create a sort of monster, a sort of lawlessness to challenge these fixed signs that were guarding the portal and establishing the rules and regulations had to be challenged. It didn't work. I love this card from the, I think it's called the Fantasy Garden Tarot, where you have this sort of creature, looks like a dinosaur almost, kind of resembles Typhon. And then you have this woman there who is kind of healing it. And I think that's interesting. Kind of reminds me of maybe Typhon being pulled off the wheel. But anyway, I don't know for certain, all these theories that I'm presenting here, but it's interesting to look at. And then you also have the three fates. Sometimes you'll see tarot cards like this one from Cersei Tarot showing the three fates. And the three fates are kind of wheeling and weaving the destiny of someone. They are sewing and they have the wheel, and the wheel is sort of instead of being like a wheel, like a tire or something that kind of rotates, it still rotates, but it's more of a spinning wheel for like making things out of threads. And they're talking about how they weave the fabric of destiny, and you can't tear this fabric. So those are the three fates. And I think that you can tear the fabric. And I think that it depends on our perspective and our perception of reality. The Science Tarot has Schrodinger's cat on it. And Schrodinger's cat is this experiment where there's a cat in a box and you have to decide, is the cat alive or dead? And depending on your mindset, the cat will either be dead or alive when you open the box. But inside of the box, because you don't know the state of the cat, both possibilities exist. It's alive and it's dead. And so I think with us, and these are my thoughts on this, that all fates and all destinies exist. And depending on our perspective, the pathway we choose is determined by our state, mental, emotional, our programming, and things that we are kind of thrown into as this whole thing is initiated. And so what I mean by that is, when we're little, we don't know. We're wiped when we come here. And so we have to progress in order to really take control of the wheel. So we see that on the RWS system, that the cherubim are reading books. So there's some knowledge that needs to be gained. Now, whether there are different versions of us that can actually take all these different pathways and that all these pathways are taken, I don't know. Or if there's one version and then that all these pathways exist and we can follow whichever one. I tend to think that there's different versions and they can all follow different pathways and that all of these things are taken. I think it only takes one of us, one perspective of us to actually take the pathway where we figure it all out. Can that one contact the others? Absolutely, I think so. And I think that happens. And I think that is sort of our higher self or some aspect of us that wants to connect with us. Which takes me to this card by the Surrealist Tarot. You have this person looking at an apple, but he's holding another person looking at an apple, who's holding another person looking at an apple, and it just keeps going and going and going. And it takes one of them to maybe eat the apple. Well, they don't have to eat it, but to get rid of the apple in order to break the pattern. I think that we are meant to break patterns, break cycles. I think that cycles are a beautiful part of nature. They're natural. They're a part of the world. They make this experience what it is. But ultimately, we break them. We break the karmic reincarnation cycles. We break time, cycles of space and time. We break them in order to be free. And that takes me to the element that I want to talk about, which is neon. And neon's perfect for this. Neon is a noble gas. And actually, first of all, before I talk about neon, if you haven't watched my channel before, one of the things I've always done on my channel is I try to connect the elements of the periodic table to a specific card in that order. And it's a kind of a form of alchemy that I like to do. And it's something that's been a part of my channel since I started, and I really enjoy it. So if you're up for this part of it, then stay tuned. So This element is neon, and it's a noble gas. It's one of those gases that doesn't interact. It's called an inert gas. It doesn't interact with the surroundings because it already has a full outer shell, so it doesn't need anything basically. And neon exists in small amounts on Earth. It's an abundant type of gas in the universe, but it's relatively, rare here on Earth. It can be bound in the soil, kind of locked into the soil. But once it's freed, it doesn't interact and it just escapes. It becomes free. It's odorless, colorless, and it doesn't take on the character or the role. It doesn't have the need to do anything here. It just is. And so its whole idea or concept is to get beyond this. However, it can be captured. Once it's captured, it can be put in a tube. And then, like the Wheel of Fortune, electrical current is put into it to excite it, to stimulate it. And the electrons on it can jump energy levels, and they can also break free to form what's called an ion. It's ionized. When it becomes ionized, it is unstable at this point because it's lost that completeness. It's lost its wholeness. And it will need to release that energy in order to go back to a ground electron state. Now, once that happens, that energy that's released gives us those colors that we see, those bright neon colors. Neon is the one that produces kind of the reddish, orangish color. Other noble gases produce the other colors. So when you look at a neon sign, it's not necessarily going to be neon in it. In fact, I don't even know if they use neon as much. But the point is, we're like neon. We're meant to not be a part of the cycle, but to be above and beyond it. Eventually we get there, but the thing is, by whose hand? Gatekeepers that determine where we go and what we do, or is our hand there and we do our thing? Because I think that's the key. All this other stuff about karma, debt, I don't buy it. I just simply don't buy it. I think our hand is important. I think our power is more important. Our power is what powers this system. It is us. We're the key. They may hold keys, but we're the key. And I think people are starting to see that. They're starting to figure that out. And it's become something that's become hopeful to me. So I like this card from the Materia Prima deck. And I think that this is the card for neon, but I think it encapsulates what I've been talking about for the last few cards. So you see these snakes, right? And the person's holding these snakes. Snakes represent Kundalini energy. They're picking these snakes up. They're raising this energy, right? And if we look at the Wheel of Fortune, there's also a snake, but it's pointing down. Kundalini should rise. This is pointing down. It's been grounded into the underworld. We're pulling it out of the underworld into us, gaining control of the chariot, gaining strength, and ultimately breaking cycles. So that's the information that I wanted to give you for the Wheel of Fortune. And I don't know, I think that this card has so many different layers and so many different parts to it that I probably barely scratched the surface. If you get this card in a reading, I would say go into your inner world and bring about those changes. Manifest in your life as best as you can. We're not perfect, and no one should blame another person for the things that happen in their life, the lot that they were given, and the time that it takes for them to pull themselves out of that lot. Patience is important. Not bashing people over the head with your law of manifestation and your ability to say, oh, you got this. So thank you guys for watching. My name is Will. This is Atypical Tarot. I'll see you next time.